Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Recruiter Podcast. Today I'm joined by Gregory Crabb. How you doing, my friend?
Very well, Thomas. Good to be here.
Good. For everyone listening, I think we're about as busy as each other, my friend, aren't we? We've both been like going, oh, God, yeah, we've got this episode and what we're going to do on the fly. But I've got a feeling we're going to smash it. I think we're going to do well. But you sound like you're pretty busy, my friend.
Indeed. I'm very grateful to be so busy with so many different portfolio companies and just keep running one to the next. A lot of work to be done. And in the early stages of a cybersecurity company, there's so many things to do and little time to do them. I think one of the great things about being involved in early stage companies is there's a real lack of resources, and you've got to be able to make do with what you have. And like I said, there's always something to be done relative to helping them to cultivate their products or getting them into the market.
Definitely. Listen, I think society would probably consider someone fairly crazy for just doing one startup. So to be dealing with multiple startups simultaneously, like you got to be off the wall.
I am off the wall. You can sign me up. But it's been exhilarating to be able to work with some really amazing founders and to see a team like I have at Ballistic, the family at Ballistic, who is so successful in this cybersecurity startup space, to be able to learn from them, understand what success is, and know when you are being successful versus when you're not. And so that to me has been a really exciting journey.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I'm excited to have you on, Greg, because I want to base more of these episodes around, like you talked about knowing when to be successful. I've done a lot of episodes before for people in IC roles or for people breaking in. I've done a few on more the business aspects and stuff like that, but I do feel like you've got a unique perspective and view compared to most, because you are just helping and managing with so many different companies simultaneously. So in terms of someone that's got a view on what's going on, I know we just talked about go-to-market, product fit, the challenges that startups in the security space have. I don't think I know there's a lot of things that you'll know that other people won't, and you'll be able to add a lot of values. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting into it. I'm just going to do, for the listeners, that I know there'll be a lot of people in the community that do know you, but there'll be some that won't. So I'm just going to do you a bit of an intro. If I get anything wrong, Greg, feel free to shout at me afterwards, by the way. But I'll try my best. But yeah, you were at the US Postal Inspection Service a fair few years back in the early 2000s. Also spent some time at director level for Interpol, which must have been interesting. You were again at the US Postal Inspection Service after that. And then you were then a Chief Information Security Officer and Vice President at the United States Postal Service for almost 6 years. You've then been in a strategic advisory role. You were then a CISO in residence, where you are now, for Ballistic Ventures. Also a field CISO for Mimic. And you were also the founder and principal at 10-8, which is your own cybersecurity company. Welcome to the show. First of all, where'd you find all the time, mate? You definitely must be busy.
Yeah, absolutely, Thomas. One of the great things are my boys have gone off to college and we're empty nesters. So it's either I watch another episode of some show that my wife is watching on Netflix, or I spend a little time at work, and I prefer to work, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah, so. I do. So I don't really take much time off, but we finished strong last year, and I was on the edge. I could feel I was right on the limit, and I took 2 weeks off for Christmas. But I tell you what, after a week, I was, joking aside, I was getting a bit down. Like, I was just like, I didn't have anything to do. I told the team that I wasn't working for 2 weeks and nothing was in the diary. And I was like, my family were like, are you, like, one of my friends rang me, went, this is the most down I've ever heard you. What is up? And I couldn't work it out. And then I was like, it's because I'm not working.
Yeah. We draw energy from this, right? And enjoying the process. And I love cybersecurity. I found a real desire lately for helping early stage cybersecurity startups. It's not necessarily a new thing for me. I mentioned my law enforcement experience. For 25 years, I was a U.S. Postal Inspector. And since this is on YouTube, those are the badges that I wore in the Postal Inspection Service. And in 2002, it was right after, obviously, 9/11 and the Patriot Act. And we were, as a country, trying to figure out what went wrong and what we could do to improve our security. And the Secret Service had a visionary that was in New York, and he showed the Secret Service the way relative to how a task force should be done. Bob Weaver was his name, and Bob was just a great visionary. And he had talked about in New York the importance of bringing academia, law enforcement, and the financial services industry together, because that was really what was important in New York from a base perspective. And I got assigned in the Patriot Act. Congress said, hey, Secret Service, expand out these task forces to every community. And so in Houston, they were focused on oil and gas, and they set up a task force in San Francisco where I was. And the chief postal inspector, the postal inspector in charge in San Francisco, walked me over to the first task force meeting, and he said, Greg, make this a success. And I had the good occasion of saying, hey, to the task force leader, the community here in Silicon Valley is amazing. And I said, we've got to work with Stanford and Berkeley, and we've got to work with the venture capitalists on Sand Hill Road. And so this was 2002. I wrote a letter to a nonprofit, the Northern California Venture Capital Association. And I said, hey, we're investigating crimes from a cybersecurity perspective that need a technology solution. We're not going to arrest our way out of these problems because the criminals sit on the other side of the planet. And so I wrote the letter, delivered 3 great, amazing venture capitalists, Ted Schlein with Kleiner Perkins, John Draper from Draper, and Mark Kwame from Sequoia at the time, were the presenters at the task force. And I've had the good occasion now to work with Ted Schlein. He's now one of the founding partners of Ballistic Ventures, the VC that I collaborate with. And it's well over 22 years ago now, 23 years ago when we first met. And Ted's made some unbelievable investments. His investment, obviously, in FireEye and exiting with Google was amazing, and just fortunate to have the Kevin Mandia and that whole persona of cybersecurity greatness associated to the fund is amazing as well. That's interesting, and I know you're very interested in finding great talent in cyber, and I think from my perspective, we have so many unsolved problems in cyber and so much more to go after. I know I've gone off on a tangent.
Not at all. No,
it's an area that I'm very passionate about. And you mind if I tell another story?
No, please carry on.
Shortly after I met Ted and the venture capitalists, I got wrapped up I was engaged in a significant Eastern European organized cybercrime case. I'd been several years in, and an investigator from Visa International, which is there in Foster City, California, real close to San Francisco, approached me and asked if I knew this persona that was online, as he used the moniker of BOA, BOA. And I didn't know if he was a snake or if he was after Bank of America, but it could have been both. And long story short, as it relates to venture capital, I recovered the hard drive that BOA used in his arrest in Cyprus, and was able to recover 8.7 million credit card numbers from that computer.
Wow.
So solved a major hack that had occurred in February of 2003. And I took that learning, professor at Stanford, the head of cryptography at Stanford, he'd been doing some research in fixed width cryptography. And so he'd written a number of papers about how to take a 16-digit field and plain text field and convert that into a 16-digit encrypted value so you wouldn't have to change the underlying data structure. And he basically created voltage security and tokenization. And that was a huge push for the next 15 years or so around moving all of those credit card databases to, and really grateful to have had the opportunity to work with Dan Bonet, who was the professor at Stanford, and his founding of Voltage and seeing that from a venture capital perspective and ultimately getting purchased by Hewlett Packard. As happenstance would have it, their technology actually helped me get PCI compliant at the Postal Service years later. So it came full circle for me. And so from a buyer perspective, from a find a problem, fix a problem perspective, that the fuel that venture capital provides in order to be able to fix those kinds of problems is amazing. Again, I've run off, Thomas, so I apologize.
No.
I'm very passionate about supporting the ecosystem of the entrepreneur, and because that's where we're going to solve these crimes. And finding the right people to surround a leadership team or to be part of the leadership team in a cybersecurity company is critical. And yeah, let's hop into this.
Yeah, no, thanks again. And please don't apologize for talking. I love hearing stories like that. And when you're talking about the FireEye and Mandy and Google and these various different, obviously you're a seriously connected guy and you've been around some phenomenal people. So there's so many different ways we can take this. But when you're in and around all the portfolio companies, Greg, and I know from conversations me and you have had off air, you've got some like really heavy hitting, well-known brands within the portfolio that are doing really like phenomenally well. What makes a good company stand out? Where do things go wrong? What could people that are maybe in startup phase right now that are listening, that are maybe struggling or they want to improve, what would you say to those folks that are listening now?
Yeah, I think the first is startups being too committed to their technology versus their customer. And a startup has a thesis. Obviously, they're solving some problem. And there's a lot of theoretical problems in cybersecurity that startup founders will go out and build a fix for. And unfortunately, when that fix hits the market, their customer might not see it the same way, see the problem set, see the solution, be able to fund the solution. And so it's really critical for a founder to focus on the customer versus focus on the solution that they're trying to bring to market. And it takes several iterations to get the product right and the message. And I think it's really important for new employees going into a startup, an early stage startup, to recognize that what you signed up for from a product perspective may be completely different 6 months from now. And if it isn't, you're probably not going to be successful. And that really is important from a personal agility perspective going into an early stage startup.
Yeah, so that's what you were talking about before when you said about product market fit. It's never going to be right from the off. You're not going to visualize it perfectly. If you're not making some mistakes, you're probably not pushing hard enough. And it's going to be stressful.
Yeah. This is not one of our portfolios. I was doing an event in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and I had the opportunity to meet a bunch of founders, and they pitched me for 15 minutes, and it was one right after the other. And I just remember this guy that came up, a young, energetic entrepreneur that really wants to hit it out of the park. And he presented his problem that he was solving to me. And the name of the company, I don't want to divulge anything, but the name of the company was something different than what was something that was a pain point, but I knew that a CISO would not be able to get business dollars in order to be able to invest in that fix,
Okay.
just because retrofitting legacy applications, which was his target, very difficult to get new investment dollars in. And his solution was going to require significant investment dollars on retrofitting old applications. And I was like, you're DOA, dead on arrival, buddy. There is no way that a CISO is going to be able to purchase that. Continue to into our 15-minute conversation. It was clear that he did not have the voice of a CISO in his organization, because some of the most obvious problems that you would face when engaged with an enterprise information security officer, he didn't even have the right nomenclature on how to address the issues. That's something that's unbelievably important as well, and something for your new hires going into an early stage startup is going back to that concept of understanding the customer. You really need to see those customers as partners and recognize that they can help you tune not only the solution that you're bringing to them, but also the message that you need to deliver in order to be able to resonate with them, and for you to really assure that the next customer is going to put their dollars behind you and purchase your product.
Just listening to you speak there, like, you've got to properly leave the ego at the door, haven't you? If you've got to change, like you've got a mega idea, you tell your whole team, this is what we're doing nothing else. And then you go, actually, I was wrong.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to.
You have to, right? And I think that's one of the most important things in running my own consultancy or working with my portfolio companies is the market changes, the needs change. I think relative to running a cybersecurity consultancy right now, I think we're in a drive to the bottom. We're competing with outsourced offshore resources from a technology leadership perspective, which you understand the economics of the global recruiting supply chain. So the U.S. market is dealing with the offshoring costs versus the onshore costs. Also, we're dealing with AI and the customer's ability to get the consulting that they need through large language models. And so I see the consulting business as a drive to the bottom. And as you can see, I pivoted into product companies. I think that's really important. I don't have a very rosy outlook right now for sheer consultancy, right? And that traditional NIST CSF type style consultant, because I think organizations are going to be driving that from a cost perspective to the bottom.
Okay, cool. So what do you think, like, what people should at least have a product offering? If you're doing professional services or working on a consulting basis, there'll be a transitional period, but you should at least have some sort of product offering within your organization as well, as a minimum.
Yeah, I think it is very important to have a product offering. That being said, there's a lot of products out in the marketplace.
There is,
and that's something that I've had the good occasion to be able to look across our portfolio and measure up other portfolios from a cyber solutions perspective and really get some sense of, what works and what doesn't work. I think that in that same vein and thinking are MSSPs, and some of them sit very strong from a product perspective, and some of them sit very challenged from a cost competitiveness perspective because they're labor focused in their approach. And yeah, I think that's a really good battlefield right now in cyber is how it's this MSSP. Does your MSSP have the right products? Is it leveraging automation in the right way? And how are they keeping costs down from a labor perspective to be able to support your organization? And that's really, I've seen that on the practitioner side in a strong way, fail. And sitting in my role as a CISO in residence and seeing all of the tech and operations of MSSPs in a different light from this vantage point, I think is really important. I've got a story. I was called into an organization under attorney-client privilege, so I can't share the details of the entity, but international operations, a couple thousand employees, CISO leaves unexpectedly. I get called in to hire a new CISO for them and right ship and get that new CISO started. Their MSSP had been struggling, and it's a popular MSSP. You'd recognize the name if I shared it. And they were attempting to automate response for this organization. In the contract, they had certain actions that needed to be taken in order to be able to cover off on alerts. And it wasn't 2 weeks into the engagement, it was clear that they weren't living up to their end of the bargain relative to the activities that needed to be conducted. And they were misapplying automation, saying that they were meeting their requirements. They didn't have the right product integration from a security tooling perspective in the organization. And as a result, it was clear that they were not meeting what they needed, and it was leaving the company exposed from a vulnerability perspective. And I think that getting that where you've got labor technology and kind of the future of technology from an innovation perspective is so critically important. And I was able to hire a proper CISO for them, and he's been doing great. They had a long way to go to be able to recover from the poor implementation that the MSSP had left for them. It's a very complicated problem set.
Yeah, it is. Not all MSSPs are created equally, are they? You see some great ones, and you just see some ones that just aren't. I hear horror stories all the time. I'm sure you do. It's it's good and bad. And I think on the automation side and stuff like that, yes, you want to be efficient, but it can be overused as well, can't it? It can be overused in every industry. I think people are getting a bit excited, and I think as an agency, we've been guilty of that ourselves on business development side. We've got too excited on the automation, and we've probably ruffled a few feathers and done stuff we shouldn't have done looking back. But when it's incident response and breaches, it's perhaps a little bit more serious.
Yeah.
So just going back, you said something really interesting about 10 minutes ago. You talked about your customers being your partners and helping you go on a journey, and you help them, and that helps the company. And I think that's a massive point. I did a recruitment training course, and they were talking about asking every single client for feedback, like good or bad, and continuously, even clients you've had for ages, just always keep pushing them for feedback. And it sounds pretty simplistic, but it's something that, unless I remind myself to do, I don't do it with all my customers all the time. But that's probably a good thing. Is that the sort of thing you were talking about? Is like really pushing them in a nice way for honest feedback in terms of your offering?
Yeah, I think that having a good design partner early in your journey is fundamental to the creation of a proper solution. Yeah, I think to your point, getting feedback early and often, and when your solution's not working or not. I remember years ago, the company no longer exists. It was purchased by Sophos. I was an early adopter of a startup. It was called Invencia. And it brought it in. It had been research that was done through DARPA. And I was really intrigued with this idea of containerizing the operating system. And Invencia had come up with this novel approach to be able to say, hey, on all your devices, we're going to containerize the operating system every new time M starts up. You're not going to have any persistence from a threat perspective because it's going to be a new instance every time. So if your employee gets hacked in a particular session, it's recycled and you reduce your dwell time in an environment. I really like that concept, brought that technology in, and even did a POC. We did the POC on 3,000 endpoints. They were working with us. And then when we went to scale to 250,000 endpoints, we broke their manual.
Oh, no. Whoops.
And they left us. And for a lot of organizations, they should see that as a quality problem. But for this organization, they didn't see it as a quality problem. And I was left with an investment that was poor. And it's through those horror stories where you really understand who you've got from a partner perspective. And in an early stage startup, you've got to have a strong team. You've got to have folks that can advocate for your product from a systems engineering perspective. You've got to have a sales team that has a stomach, that going back to that agility is probably the most important. Is when a problem like that comes up, they see that as an opportunity. They don't see it as we failed. And if your engineering team and your sales team can't fix those kinds of problems together with the client, that technology offered great opportunity, I think, and really it faltered instead of shined. A company that's in our portfolio, and I know that you've done some work with them, was on the opposite side of that, Thomas.
Okay.
And that's SpectreOps. In my early days at the Postal Service, I came into the Postal Service after a major data breach. China hacked all of our employee data. It was very public, same time as the OPM breach. And so I needed to establish a solid administrative tier. And the predecessor, it wasn't SpectreOps yet. It was called Bloodhound, as an open source project. And based on the size of my organization, our early attempts to use Bloodhound failed because our domain was too large.
Okay.
And working with the open source community and the founders of Bloodhound, we were able to ultimately get that working. And it was an unbelievable tool. And I think that resiliency that of the leadership team at SpectreOps to be agile, to make sure that grew, I think a testament to the types of things that organizations need to do in order to be able to be successful from an early stage startup perspective. And my recommendation for your listeners is when you enter an early stage startup, be prepared for massive change. That 6 months from now, you might not be doing the same thing. You might not be addressing the same pain point for your customer. And your solution is going to have to evolve. You are going to have to grow and evolve. And what was on that requisition from an employment perspective might not be as relevant into the future. And it's only going to change with the shifting change of technology as well.
Yeah, it is. And just two words that I'm hearing, like agile and adaptable. And I think those two qualities are going to become more and more imperative and more prevalent as time goes on, because the change of everything is just happening at such a rapid pace now. And I've thought it myself before, oh God, things move. You've got to be able to pivot quick at the minute. And if you get set in your ways and you're not prepared to budge, you can get eaten alive pretty quick these days, I think.
For sure.
Yeah, no, cool. Great. I really want to talk to you about the go-to-market strategy. I know we briefly touched upon it before we hit record. Obviously, it'd be nice I'd like to hear as well, like what makes, I know you briefly touched on it with that entrepreneur that was at that event in DC you were at 2 weeks ago, but I'd like to hear about what makes a company investable and things that people should be aware of if they're looking to raise capital and so on and so forth. But we'll start with the go-to-market stuff first, if that's all right. I read a stat recently that said something like 90% of startups, the reason they fail is sales and go-to-market stuff. What kind of hints, tips, advice have you got on the go-to-market side? What are you seeing working? What are you seeing not working in and around the portfolio companies?
I'm going to start. There's so much to dive in.
There is.
Relative to that topic. I'm going to start with differentiation. From a product perspective, it's a crowded marketplace. When I started, obviously, working with the VCs back in the early 2000s, there were very few cybersecurity technologies, right?
Yeah.
Now you've got thousands, and every year your security buyer is seeing hundreds of new vendors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most startups struggle to articulate why they're different, right? And I think that's really a important feature. And then I see so many startups get into the competition space and not the innovation space. This is an extremely important concept. They look at their competitors and they think they have to compete with their competitors. And in competing with their competitors, they align their nomenclature around the terms that that their competitors use. And in doing so, they do not differentiate themselves in the market. And it is so fundamental. And if you are competing, those margins get to be so low that you will not survive. Mm-hmm. It is fundamental that you have to be able to articulate your solution in a completely different manner and recognize that the product you need to develop, if you're trying to develop against your competitor and do the same thing your competitor is doing, go home. Don't waste anybody's time, money, or effort, or your own. Go get a job. If you really want to go out there and create something different, you need to use different language. You need to go to the market different. Your product needs to behave different. And we need real difference in being able to solve these cybersecurity problems. But I see so many organizations just trying to copy what somebody else does and go home, go get a job. Don't waste an investor's time. Don't waste your own time. Go get a job.
Yeah, no, cool. Thanks for being so transparent on that as well. So how would you make sure you are different? More planning at the start, more research, more market research on the front end, advice from guys like you?
All of the above, Thomas. I think that, a startup really needs to do, to your point, the research. They need to understand what the problem is, how to approach the market, to address that problem in a unique way. And yeah, it just resonates with me. There are so many companies that I've been approached with that are trying to do what Wiz does.
Okay.
And no, what you're selling, and you articulate it to me in 2 minutes or less, sounds like what Wiz is doing. Don't bother. Go home. Go to work for Wiz. Define a problem truly needs to be solved. Define your approach. And I think there's a lot of approaches in trusted execution that are unexplored. And I think this game of whack-a-mole that we're doing relative to detection and response is a loser. I think organizations that are in the detection and response space, we're losing the game of cybersecurity because that's the way we're playing it. And so I would take thousands of companies that are in that detection and response space and say, you're losing. We've got to do something significantly different. And that's some very broad advice, but
yeah. It's good. And I think as well, getting this stuff nailed down and being able to articulate your offering to the market in a clear, concise manner, because it's, you know what it's like, mate. At times it's just going to get, even with all that stuff, it's still going to be tough. So like to have all that stuff wrong and not plan it out properly and not have something that's genuinely adding value, yeah, you're setting yourself up to fail. I think taking that bit of extra time at the start and getting it right, I think just from a mindset perspective, a results perspective, just the doing things right perspective, it really matters.
Another area here is selling to the right person. Selling to the right person in an organization. I see a lot of ineffective sales strategy. Sometimes selling to the CISO is not the right person to sell to, depending upon your solution. And targeting lower in the organization or targeting peers to the CISO that can support. I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs talking about who is their, who's the ICP, right? What's their ideal client profile, and making sure that we understand the technology that they have to offer, and is it really the CISO? And in some cases, a good cybersecurity startup, yes, the CISO is the right target. But so often we need to get to the security architects, DevOps teams, partners of the information security programs like risk or compliance. And I think that's super important as well.
Cool. Yeah, no, thanks, Greg. On the kind of investing side of things, or what makes a company super investable and what doesn't, is there anything that the companies within the portfolio have got that others haven't? Is there any kind of things that you look out for, or red flags, or things that people should be aware of from raising capital and getting investment perspective?
From a red flags perspective on capital, right, you need to have that ARR in order to be able to get to the next round. And I say that with a little hesitation, because in some cases, if you're too early, you need to have the right product before you get the ARR, right? And early, you need to manage the technical risk. And then later, I shouldn't say too later, you need to get to that managing the go-to-market risk.
Yeah. I think the other thing is good. Like I say, it's just hard, isn't it? It's that old saying, if it was easy, everyone would doing it. I think having the ARR is just phenomenal. Having those monthlies landing, we do some contract recruitment, and when that money's landing every month, it's a nice feeling. You've got a number coming in every morning before you get out of bed, and it makes it slightly less stressful.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're just constantly in the sales cycle.
But no, do you know what? Like listening to us both talk, and it's hard. But I tell you what, it's great fun. That's what makes it so much fun. I know we were saying earlier about getting down when you're not working and stuff like that, but it's hard. It's a nightmare at times, but I don't think we'd change it for the world. It makes us feel alive, I think. Maybe we'd have more hair. We haven't got much between us.
Yeah, that's for sure. You've got a few more strands than I do. Now, I think going back to one of my early points, the life of a startup is really one of limited resources. And I think it's important for a startup to be lean and mean. That deprivation where real ingenuity is required, right? And being able to solve that problem and move forward. I think that's one of the great things about entrepreneurship, is being able to take the limited resources that you have and make them into a solution that meets people's needs, meets organizations' needs. So yeah, that, I think from a closing perspective, I think that's probably one of the most important points from what I've seen in my journey through this entrepreneurial phase in my career.
Yeah, I think sometimes being pretty desperate is a good thing as well. Like I noticed, when we were desperate, we would just get up, execute, and then you go on a good thing, you get a bit ahead of yourself, you maybe have a few months, you're like, whoa, I didn't realize we could do that. And then we start looking at all this rec tech and all these different things that can make us better recruiters, and you start looking at it and you realize that there isn't really any shortcuts. Kind of headhunting's headhunting, it's relationships, it's hard work, you've got to grind. And then you're like, oh God, we've not done as well these last few weeks as what we have. And it's like when we were desperate, we were almost better, because it was like we just had to execute and crack on, or that was it. And sometimes you can just get distracted, and all these things that you think matter don't matter. But it's like I said to the team earlier, I said, let's just get back to just execute. And sometimes it can feel a bit boring, but it gets results and it gets you onto the next stage, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. What's going on with your own company with the product side of things then, Greg? Anything you can report there? What's on the horizon?
I'm so focused on the ballistic portfolio.
Okay.
I am excited about a bit of work that I'll be doing around insider risk. And that it's going to actually be supporting some of our portfolio. I think organizations need to be very cognizant of insider risk. I don't have a lot of time to be able to go into some stories in that area, but I think this whole remote work, insider risk of false remote employees, I think is a significant challenge that we're going to see more and more of the months and years ahead. That's one of many angles from an insider risk perspective that I'm looking at from a consulting perspective.
Well, that's quite relevant at the minute with what happened last year. Before, that was pretty major.
Yeah. In talking to the ecosystem, there's a lot more that is unreported of that problem, and so recruiter beware.
Yeah, I was going to say we someone needs to get some more decent recruiters in the market. Yeah, Greg, I've really enjoyed it, and it's I like these ones where they're just unscripted and we just chat away. It's nice, and the time's flown, and it's been good. And I do appreciate your time as well, because I know you're like a mega busy guy. I think we rearranged this once, which I can't remember whether it was your fault or my fault, but we'll just call it a draw, shall we?
Yeah, indeed. And I apologize. As busy as has it, I've got another commitment here.
No, cool. No, we'll sure. Thanks for your time, my friend, and we'll speak soon.
Take care. Thank you, Thomas, and appreciate the opportunity.